The stars burned with the light of 1,000 dying ships. In the dark space near the third planet of the Kepler system, two massive fleets faced each other like ancient warriors preparing for battle. The war had been going on for 3 long years, and both sides were tired of fighting, but neither side would give up. Commander Zektar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the enemy fleet through the large viewing screen. His 4 arms moved across the control panels as he checked his ship's weapons one more time. The hegemony had sent him here with 200 of their best warships. Today, he would either win this war or die trying. "Sir, all ships report ready. For battle," his weapons officer said. The young soldier's voice shook slightly. Even after 3 years of war, the sight of so many enemy ships still scared the crew. Zektar's species had been space travelers for over 1,000 years. They had built a great empire that stretched across 50 star systems, but they had never fought a war like this one. Wars were supposed to be quick and clean. A few battles, some negotiations, and then peace. This war was different. It went on and on, bleeding both sides dry. On the other side of the battlefield, Admiral Velnara of the Free Worlds Alliance checked her own fleet. She had fought Zektar many times before. They knew each other's tactics well. Both commanders were skilled, both were determined, and both knew that today's battle would decide everything. "Enemy fleet is holding position," her sensor operator reported. "They're waiting for us to make the first move." Velnara smiled. Her blue skin turned slightly purple when she was amused. After 3 years of fighting the hegemony, she had learned to read their patterns. Zektar was careful and smart. He would not attack until he was sure he could win. The Alliance fleet spread out in a wide formation. Their ships were sleek and fast, built for hit-and-run attacks. The hegemony ships were bigger and stronger, designed to stand and fight. Both fleets had advantages, both fleets had weaknesses. Between the two fleets, empty space waited. In a few minutes, that space would be filled with energy beams, missiles, and exploding ships. Thousands of soldiers would die, maybe tens of thousands. Both commanders knew this, but they also knew they had no choice. The war had gone too far to stop now. Zektar looked at the tactical display. His ships outnumbered, the enemy slightly, but Velnara was tricky. She might have ships hiding nearby, ready to jump into the battle at the worst moment. He had learned not to trust what his sensors showed him. "Begin the attack pattern," he ordered. "All ships, advance on my command." The hegemony fleet started, moving forward slowly. Their big ships stayed in tight formation, protecting each other with overlapping shields. It was an old tactic, but it worked. The Alliance would have to come to them, or watch their home planets burn. Velnara saw the enemy movement and nodded. This was exactly what she expected. "Signal all ships," she said. "Execute Plan 7. The Alliance fleet split into 3 groups. The main force would hit the enemy head-on while 2 smaller groups attacked from the sides. It was risky, but it was their only chance against the stronger hegemony ships. Both fleets moved closer to each other. The space between them grew smaller and smaller. Weapons charged up, ready to fire. Shields powered up to maximum strength. In the ships, soldiers said prayers to their gods and thought about home. Then something impossible happened. "Sir," the sensor officer on Zektar's ship suddenly shouted. "New contact. Unknown ship approaching from Sector 7. Zektar spun around. "What? Show me." The main screen changed to show a new ship at the edge of the system. It was small compared to the warships in both fleets. Its design was strange and blocky, not like anything in their databases. Most surprising of all, it seemed to be alone. On the Alliance flagship, Velnara got the same report. "One ship?" she asked. "Are you sure?" "Yes, Admiral. Just one ship. It's moving toward us at low speed. Design is completely unknown." Both commanders stared at their screens. In the middle of the biggest space battle in 3 years, a mystery ship had appeared. Who were they? What did they want? And why would anyone fly a single ship into a war zone? Could it be a new hegemony weapon? Velnara asked her officers. "No," her science officer replied. The ship's technology is different from both our fleets. The engine signature is completely unknown. Zektar was thinking the same thing. It's not one of ours, he told his crew. But it's not Alliance either. Something new has entered our war. The unknown ship kept coming closer. It showed no signs of weapons charging or shields powering up. It just flew steadily toward the two fleets as if it belonged there. For the first time in 3 years of war, both commanders faced the same problem. They had been ready to fight each other. They knew each other's ships, weapons, and tactics. But this new ship changed everything. "Sir, what are your orders?" "Zektar's," weapons officer asked. Zektar looked at the Alliance fleet, then at the mystery ship. The war could wait a few more minutes. He needed to know who these newcomers were and what they wanted. "Hold position," he ordered. "All ships, stand ready but do not fire. We have a new player in our game." Across the battlefield, Velnara gave similar orders. For the first time in months, both fleets stopped trying to kill each other. Instead, they watched and waited as the small, strange ship approached. Neither commander knew it yet, but their war was about to change forever. The galaxy was about to meet humanity. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Independence and watched the stars change as his ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. After 6 months of traveling through empty space, they had finally reached their destination. The Kepler system was supposed to be empty, just another star with planets that might support life someday. "Jump complete, Captain," said Chief Engineer Lisa Park from her station. "All systems normal. We're at the edge of the Kepler system." Jake nodded and looked around his bridge. His crew of 45 people had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see Earth again. They were humanity's first deep space explorers, sent to find new worlds and maybe new life. The United Nations had built only 5 ships like the Independence. This was humanity's biggest step into the galaxy. "Ryan, start scanning the system," Jake ordered his tactical officer. "Let's see what we found." Ryan Cole was a former Navy officer who had joined the space program when Earth's governments finally agreed to work together on space exploration. His fingers moved across his control panel as the ship's sensors reached out into the new system. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings," Ryan said after a few minutes. His voice sounded worried. "There are a lot of energy signatures in this system. Way more than there should be." Jake walked over to Ryan's station. On the screen, dozens of bright dots showed up near the system's inner planets. Each dot represented something big and powerful. "Amy, can you make sense of this?" Jake asked. Communications specialist Amy Foster was the youngest member of the bridge crew. She had learned 12 Earth languages and helped design the translation, computers they hoped to use if they ever met aliens. Now she was looking at readings that made no sense. "Captain, those energy signatures are moving," Amy said. "They're not planets or asteroids, they're ships. Lots of ships." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. They had hoped to find alien life, but they had found something much bigger. They had found an alien war. "How many ships?" Jake asked. Ryan checked his readings again. "I count at least 400, sir, maybe more. They're in 2 large groups facing each other near the 3rd planet." Dr. Helen Cruz, the mission's science officer, looked up from her station. She had been studying the star charts when the ship arrived. Now she was looking at something that would change human history forever. "Captain, this appears to be a battle formation," Helen said. "Both groups of ships are positioned for combat. We may have arrived in the middle of an active war zone." Jake felt his heart beat faster. Earth had sent them to explore and maybe make peaceful contact with any aliens they found. Nobody had prepared them for walking into the middle of an alien war. "Lisa, how fast can we get out of here if we need to?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her engine displays. "The jump drive needs 30 minutes to recharge, Captain. We're stuck here until then." Jake looked at the tactical display again. 400 alien warships. His ship had some defensive weapons, but nothing that could fight. A real space battle. The Independence was built for exploration, not war. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "I'm picking up communications between the 2 fleets. The computer is trying to translate, but it's very difficult. They seem to be preparing for battle." Jake had to make a decision. He could order his crew to hide at the edge of the system and wait for the jump drive to recharge. Then they could return to Earth with news of alien life. Or he could try to make contact and risk his ship and crew. "Captain," Dr. Cruz said, "this is the most important moment in human history. We're the first humans to encounter alien intelligence. What we do here could determine how humanity's future unfolds." Jake knew she was right. Earth's leaders had sent them out here to represent all of humanity. They had hoped for peaceful first contact, but they had found something more complicated. "Amy, prepare a general broadcast," Jake ordered. "Mathematical sequences, basic physics, anything that shows we're intelligent and peaceful." "Yes, sir," Amy replied. She started working on a message that any intelligent species should be able to understand. "Ryan, move us closer, but keep us away from both fleets," Jake said. "I want them to see us, but I don't want to look threatening." "Captain, are you sure about this?" Lisa asked. "We don't know anything about these aliens. They might shoot first and ask questions later." Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they trusted him. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing it was dangerous. Now the danger was real. "We came out here to meet aliens," Jake said. "Well, we found them. If we run away now, we might never get another chance. Earth needs to know what's out here." The Independence moved slowly toward the two alien fleets. As they got closer, the ship's sensors picked up more details. The alien ships were huge and powerful. Some were bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their technology looked far ahead of Earth's. "Captain, one of the fleets is changing position," Ryan reported. "Some of their ships are turning toward us." Jake felt sweat on his forehead. This was it. Humanity's first contact with alien life was about to happen in the middle of someone else's war. "Amy, start broadcasting our message," Jake ordered. "Let them know we come in peace." As the message went out, Jake wondered if he had just made the best or worst decision in human history. In a few minutes, they would find out how aliens reacted to meeting humans for the first time. The Independence flew on toward its date with destiny, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species into the unknown. Commander Zektar watched the strange ship move closer to his fleet. The unknown vessel was small and crude-looking compared to his warships. Its hull was thick and blocky, with none of the elegant curves that marked advanced spacecraft design. Whoever built it clearly knew very little about proper engineering. "Sir, the alien ship is broadcasting some kind of signal," his communications officer reported. "It appears to be mathematical sequences and basic physics. I think they're trying to show they're intelligent." Zektar's four eyes narrowed as he studied the primitive vessel. "How intelligent can they be if they fly a single ship into a war zone?" he asked. "This could be a spy sent by the Alliance." The thought made him angry. The Alliance had tried many tricks during the war, but sending a fake alien ship was a new low. He would not let them fool him. "Signal Attack Squadron 7, Zektar ordered. "Have them intercept and destroy that ship. We have a war to fight." 6 sleek hegemony fighters broke away from the main fleet and moved toward the Independence. Their pilots were confident. The alien ship had no visible weapons and looked too primitive to be dangerous. This would be an easy kill. On the Independence, Ryan Cole watched the approaching fighters on his tactical screen. "Captain, 6 ships are heading straight for us. They're not responding to our messages." Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop. He had hoped the aliens would at least try to communicate before shooting. "How long until they reach us?" 2 minutes, sir," Ryan replied. "They're moving fast." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was scared but ready. They had trained for dangerous situations, though nobody had prepared them for alien combat. "Amy, keep broadcasting our peaceful intentions," Jake ordered. "Lisa, give me everything the engines can handle. Ryan, power up our defensive systems. Captain, our weapons are designed for asteroid mining and clearing debris," Ryan said. "They're not meant for fighting." "Then we'll have to make them work," Jake replied. "We didn't come this far to give up now." The hegemony fighters closed in fast. Their leader, a veteran pilot named Kixara, had fought in dozens of battles. He had never seen a ship design like the human vessel, but he was not worried. The primitive craft would be destroyed in seconds. All fighters attack formation, Kixara ordered. Target their engines first, then finish them off. The fighters opened fire with precise energy beams. But something unexpected happened. The human ship's defensive systems activated, and a wall of projectile fire erupted from its hull. Ryan had activated every defensive gun on the Independence. The ship's mining lasers and debris clearance systems were not built for combat, but they fired much faster than alien weapons. Instead of carefully aimed energy beams, the human ship threw out hundreds of small projectiles every second. "What in the void is that?" Kixara shouted as his fighter shook from multiple impacts. He had never seen weapons that fired so quickly. His shields, designed to stop powerful energy beams, could not handle the constant rain of small projectiles. 2 fighters exploded immediately. The others scattered, trying to avoid the unexpected barrage. Kixara's own ship took heavy damage before he could pull away. "Retreat! Retreat!" he called to his remaining pilots. "That ship has weapons we've never seen before." On both alien flagships, commanders watched in shock as the primitive vessel drove off experienced fighters with ease. The human ship had not moved like a warship. It had not used advanced tactics, it had simply fired more bullets than anyone expected. Commander Zektar stared at his tactical display. 6 of his best fighters had been defeated by one small ship. "How is this possible?" he demanded. Across the battlefield, Admiral Velnara was having similar thoughts. Her blue skin had turned pale as she watched the engagement. "Get me detailed scans of that ship," she ordered her science officer. Both fleets had stopped their preparations for battle. All attention was now focused on the mysterious human vessel that had just proven it was not as helpless as it looked. On the Independence, Jake's crew was celebrating their survival. "We did it," Ryan shouted. "We drove them off." But Jake was not celebrating. He knew they had just made the situation much more complicated. "Amy, are you getting any responses to our messages?" "Yes, sir," Amy replied. "Both fleets are trying to communicate with us now. The computer is working on translations." Dr. Helen Cruz looked up from her analysis station. "Captain, I'm studying the alien ship designs and their attack patterns. Something's not right here." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Their weapons are incredibly precise," Helen explained. "They could have destroyed us instantly if they wanted to. Instead, they used exactly the amount of force needed to disable our engines. These aliens fight very differently than humans do." Jake thought about this. Human military doctrine was simple. Use overwhelming force to end fights quickly. But these aliens seem to prefer precise, controlled attacks. "Sir, I'm getting partial translations," Amy reported. "Both fleets are asking who we are and where we come from. They also want to know about our weapons." Admiral Velnara was the first to establish clear communication. Her translation computers were more advanced than the hegemony's equipment. Unknown. "Vessel, this is Admiral Velnara of the Free Worlds Alliance. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Nations ship Independence. We come from the planet Earth and mean no harm to anyone." There was a long pause before Velnara replied. "Earth? We have no record of this world. Are you refugees from the war?" "No," Jake answered. "We're explorers. We didn't know there was a war here." Another pause, then Velnara's voice came back, sounding puzzled. "You flew a single ship into an active battle zone to explore? Are all your people this brave or this foolish?" Before Jake could answer, Commander Zektar's voice cut in. His translation system had finally worked. "Alliance ship Independence. You have interfered in hegemony military operations. Explain your presence immediately." Jake found himself talking to 2 alien commanders who had been trying to kill each other minutes earlier. Now they were both focused on him and his crew. "We're peaceful explorers," Jake repeated. "We were sent to study new star systems and hopefully meet other intelligent species." Commander Zektar's laugh sounded strange through the translation system. "Peaceful? Your weapons just destroyed 2 of my fighters and damaged 4 others." Jake realized the aliens did not understand human defensive thinking. To them, the Independence's response had been an aggressive attack rather than desperate self-defense. The three ships hung in space, each trying to understand the others. Humanity had made first contact, but it was nothing like anyone had expected. Instead of peaceful meetings, they had stumbled into a war and immediately proven they could fight. None of them knew it yet, but this confused first encounter would change the galaxy forever. Dr. Helen Cruz worked at her science station, studying the data from their encounter with the alien fighters. Something about the alien ships bothered her, but she could not figure out what it was. Their technology was clearly more advanced than Earth's, yet they had been surprised by the Independence's simple defensive systems. "Captain, I need to show you something," Helen said to Jake Morrison. "The alien weapons are much more powerful than ours, but they use them very differently." Jake walked over to Helen's station. The screen showed recordings of the alien fighter attack. "What do you mean?" "Look at this," Helen pointed to the display. "When they fired at us, they aimed for our engines, not our crew areas. They were trying to disable us, not kill us. Even in the middle of a war, they're trying to minimize casualties." Jake frowned as he watched the attack again. Helen was right. The alien fighters could have destroyed the Independence completely, but they had held back. "That's not how humans fight wars," Jake said quietly. "Exactly," Helen replied. "Captain, I think we need to be very careful about what we tell them about Earth." Across the space between the fleets, Commander Zektar was having an urgent meeting with his officers. The encounter with the human ship had changed everything. "Sir, we've analyzed their weapons," his science officer reported. "The projectile systems are primitive, but they fire at rates we've never seen. Where we might fire one precise shot, they fire hundreds of random ones." Zektar's forearms moved nervously. "Random shots? That seems wasteful." "That's what I thought too, sir. But it works. Our shields can stop powerful energy beams, but they can't handle constant impacts from small projectiles. It's like they designed their weapons specifically to counter our defenses." On the Alliance flagship, Admiral Velnara was learning similar things from her own analysis team. "Admiral, the human ship is very strange," her chief engineer explained. "Every system seems to be built with fighting in mind. Their engines can change direction quickly for combat maneuvers. Their hull is much thicker than needed for exploration. Even their communications array is armored." Velnara's blue skin turned darker as she thought about this. "Are you saying their exploration ship is actually a warship?" "Not exactly, Admiral. It appears to be a real exploration vessel. But it's built like everything they make might need to fight someday. This suggests their entire species thinks about warfare very differently than we do." Both alien commanders decided they needed to learn more about these humans. They opened a three-way communication channel with Captain Morrison. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Velnara began, "we would like to understand your people better. Can you tell us about your home world?" Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was listening carefully. This conversation could determine how the galaxy saw humanity forever. "Earth is a beautiful planet," Jake said. "We have many different countries and peoples, but we're learning to work together. That's why we built ships like this one, to explore space as a united species." Commander Zektar's voice came through the translator. "How many countries do you have?" "About 200, Jake replied. There was a long silence. Finally, Velnara spoke. 200 separate governments on one planet? How do you make decisions?" "We have an organization called the United Nations where all countries can meet and discuss problems," Jake explained. "But what happens when countries disagree?" Zektar asked. Jake hesitated. This was the question he had been afraid of. "Sometimes, we have conflicts. We're still learning how to solve problems peacefully." Amy Foster, who had been monitoring the conversation, noticed something strange in the alien responses. "Captain," she whispered, "I don't think they understand what you mean by conflicts." Dr. Cruz had been studying the alien communication patterns too. She had a terrible realization. "Captain, I think their species may not have wars the way we do. This conflict between their fleets might be the first real war they've ever fought." Jake felt cold as he understood what Helen was saying. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. These aliens were fighting their first real war and had been doing it for only 3 years. Captain Morrison, Velnara said, when you say conflicts, do you mean like the current war between the hegemony and the alliance? Well, yes, Jake replied carefully, but Earth has had many wars throughout our history. How many wars? Zektar asked. Jake looked at Dr. Cruz, who had been studying Earth's military history. She shook her head sadly. We've never been able to count them all. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands over our recorded history. The silence that followed lasted for several minutes. When the aliens finally spoke, their voices sounded different. Captain Morrison, Admiral Velnara said slowly, are you saying your species has been fighting continuous wars for your entire history? Not continuous, Jake said. We've had periods of peace too. But yes, warfare has been a constant part of human civilization. Commander Zektar's voice sounded shocked. And you've survived as a species? We've done more than survive, Jake replied. We've grown stronger. War taught us to work together, to innovate, to never give up. It's part of who we are. Dr. Cruz was monitoring the alien fleet movements. Both groups of ships were moving away from each other and closer to the Independence. Not in an attacking formation, but as if they wanted to be near the human ship for protection. Captain, Helen whispered, I think we just scared them. Amy was analyzing the alien communications. Sir, they're talking to each other now. The translation is rough, but I think they're discussing whether to continue their war. Jake realized what was happening. The aliens had been fighting for 3 years and thought it was the worst thing imaginable. Then humans had arrived and casually mentioned fighting thousands of wars over their entire history. Captain Morrison, Velnara said, if your people have so much experience with warfare, perhaps you could help us understand something. How do wars end? Jake thought about all the wars in Earth's history. Usually one side wins and the other side loses. Or both sides get tired of fighting and make peace. But how do you make peace after so much violence? Zektar asked. You forgive your enemies and try to build something better together, Jake replied. It's not easy, but it's possible. Both alien commanders were quiet for a long time. Finally, Velnara spoke. Captain Morrison, would you be willing to help us end our war? Jake looked at his crew. They were 45 humans in a single ship, being asked to solve a galactic conflict. It should have been impossible. But Jake Morrison was human, and humans had been solving impossible problems through warfare and diplomacy for thousands of years. We'll try, he said. Captain Jake Morrison looked at the tactical display showing 400 alien warships spread across space. Both fleets had stopped moving toward each other and were now focused on his single ship. The weight of their request pressed down on him like a heavy stone. Captain, Dr. Helen Cruz said quietly, we're just explorers. We're not diplomats or peace negotiators. Jake nodded, but his mind was already working. Maybe that's exactly what they need, Helen. Someone who isn't part of their war. Amy Foster looked up from her communication station. Sir, both fleets are repositioning. They're not preparing to fight each other anymore. They're both moving closer to us. Ryan Cole checked his tactical readings. They're not in attack formation. Captain, it looks more like they want to be near us for some reason. Jake understood what was happening. The aliens had learned something about humanity that frightened them more than their enemies did. 2 fleets that had been ready to destroy each other were now seeking protection from a single human ship. Open a channel to both commanders, Jake ordered. Admiral Velnara's voice came through first. Captain Morrison, our governments have been fighting for 3 years. Millions have died. We've tried negotiations before, but they always fail. Why should we trust humans to succeed where we have failed? Commander Zektar's translated voice followed. The Alliance speaks truth for once. We have tried to end this war many times. What can your people do that we cannot? Jake thought about Earth's long history of conflicts and peace treaties. Some had lasted for centuries, others had failed within years. But humans had learned something important through all those wars. We understand both sides of war, Jake said. We know what It's like to fight and what it's like to lose. We know what it costs to win and what it costs to make peace. Maybe that experience can help. Dr. Cruz was studying the alien fleet formations on her screen. Captain, something else is happening. I'm detecting new ships approaching the system. Ryan checked his long-range sensors. Confirmed, sir, 4 ships coming in fast. They're using the same drive signature as us. Jake felt his heart jump. Earth had sent more ships. How long until they arrive? 3 days at their current speed, Ryan replied. Amy picked up a new transmission. Captain, it's Admiral Patricia Kane on the UNS Defiance. She wants to speak with you. Jake had served under Admiral Kane before joining the exploration program. She was tough, smart, and never gave up on anything she believed in. Put her through, Jake ordered. Admiral Kane's voice was clear and strong. Jake, we got your first. Reports about the alien contact. Earth has decided to support your mission with a small task force. What's your situation? Jake looked around his bridge. How could he explain that 45 humans were about to try ending a galactic war? Admiral, we've made contact with 2 alien civilizations currently at war with each other. They've asked us to help negotiate peace. There was a pause before Kane replied. Just to be clear, Captain, you're telling me that aliens are asking humans to help them stop fighting? Yes, ma'am, Jake said. Kane's laugh came through the speaker. Well, that's a first. We'll be there in 3 days. Try not to start any new wars before we arrive. Commander Zektar had been listening to the exchange. Captain Morrison, more human ships are coming. Are they warships? Jake thought about how to answer. The UNS Defiance was more heavily armed than the Independence, but it was still primarily an exploration vessel. They're ships like ours, Jake said. Built for exploration but ready to defend themselves if needed. Admiral Velnara's voice carried a new tone of worry. How many human ships exist? Earth has built 5 deep space vessels so far, Jake replied honestly. We're a young species when it comes to space travel. Both alien commanders were quiet for several minutes. Jake wondered what they were thinking. Finally, Velnara spoke. Captain Morrison, you say your people have fought thousands of wars. How many ships did you use in your largest space battles? Jake realized the aliens still did not understand human history. Admiral, until recently, humans had no space battles at all. All our wars were fought on our planet's surface. All of them? Zektar asked. Thousands of wars on one world? Yes, Jake confirmed. We learned to fight and make peace while sharing the same small planet. That's why we understand both conflict and cooperation. The silence that followed was the longest yet. Jake could almost feel both alien fleets trying to process this information. Finally, Dr. Cruz spoke quietly. Captain, look at the tactical display. Jake looked at his screen and saw something amazing. Both alien fleets had completely stopped their battle preparations. Ships that had been in attack formations were now spread out in defensive positions, but not defending against each other. They were positioned as if they expected to defend together against some outside threat. Amy, what are they saying to each other? Jake asked. Amy listened to the alien communications and worked with the translation computer. Sir, they're discussing the possibility that there might be other species in the galaxy like humans. Species that have been fighting wars for thousands of years. Jake understood. The aliens were not just worried about humans. They were worried about what other warlike species might exist in the galaxy. The hegemony and alliance had found something more frightening than each other. Captain Morrison, Admiral Velnara said, if we accept your help in ending our war, what would you require from us? Jake thought carefully. This was the moment that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy. Nothing, Jake said. We help because it's the right thing to do. That's what humans do when we're not fighting. Commander Zektar's voice sounded puzzled. You want nothing in return? No territory, no resources, no trade agreements? We'd like to be friends, Jake replied. We'd like to learn from you and share what we know, but we won't force you to give us anything. Both alien commanders began talking to their fleets. Jake could not understand the conversations, but Amy was translating what she could. Sir, both sides are discussing a ceasefire, Amy reported. They want to negotiate, but they want human observers present during the talks. Jake looked at his crew. They had come to explore new worlds and had instead become humanity's first ambassadors to a galactic civilization. In 3 days, Admiral Kane would arrive with more ships and more crew members. Together, they would try to end a war that had killed millions. Tell them we accept, Jake said. The United Nations will help both sides find peace. As his words were translated and broadcast to both fleets, Jake watched 400 alien warships slowly power down their weapons. For the first time in 3 years. The space around the Kepler system was quiet. The Armada had frozen not from fear of human weapons, but from the realization that humans understood something they did not. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning that wars must end, that enemies can become friends, and that peace is always worth fighting for. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew had done something impossible. They had ended a galactic war simply by being human.
The Valari Collective had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 100,000 worlds, and no species in the known galaxy dared to challenge their power. They were the oldest civilization, the most advanced, and the most feared. Their silver warships moved through space like predators, and wherever they went, other races bowed their heads and accepted their fate. This was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, and the weak served. The Valari had always been strong. Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his observation vessel, the Endless Dawn, watching the data scroll across his display screens. He was old by Valari standards, nearly 400 years, and he had spent most of that time cataloging primitive civilizations. It was boring work, but necessary. The collective needed to know about every species in the galaxy, needed to track their development, needed to decide when they were ready to be brought into the fold. Most species accepted their place without resistance. Those that did not were quickly taught the error of their ways. The latest species on his list called themselves humans. They came from a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star on the edge of the Orion Arm. Zorath had been watching them for 50 years now, ever since their first radio signals had reached Valari listening posts. They were a curious species, violent and chaotic, always fighting among themselves. They had nearly destroyed their own world several times with their primitive weapons. Zorath had expected them to wipe themselves out long before they ever reached the stars, but they had surprised him. Somehow, despite their constant wars and their self-destructive tendencies, the humans had developed faster than light travel. It was crude technology, a clumsy warp drive that left visible ripples in subspace. But it worked. They had begun to spread beyond their home system, establishing colonies on nearby worlds, building stations in the darkness between stars. They were expanding, and the collective did not like it when primitive species expanded without permission. Zorath sent his report to the High Council and received his orders within days. A scout fleet would be dispatched to the human solar system. They would make contact, explain the situation, and give the humans a choice. They could join the collective peacefully, accepting their place as a labor caste, or they could be conquered by force. Most species chose the first option. The second was too terrible to contemplate. The scout fleet consisted of 12 warships, sleek silver vessels armed with plasma cannons and protected by energy shields that could withstand almost any attack. Zorath commanded from the Endless Dawn, watching as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. The journey had taken 3 days, and his crews were eager to begin their work. This would be a simple mission, over within hours. The humans had no significant military presence in space, no weapons capable of threatening Valari warships, no experience in interstellar combat. They would see the fleet, understand their situation, and surrender. That was how it always went. But as the Valari ships began their approach toward the inner system, something unexpected happened. A single vessel emerged from behind the fourth planet. A rust-colored world, the humans called Mars. The ship was unlike anything Zorath had ever seen. It was ugly. All sharp angles and exposed weapon ports, painted in dark gray with white lettering on its hull. The lettering identified it as the USS Horizon, and it was broadcasting a warning on all frequencies. Zorath studied the vessel with growing curiosity. It was large for a human ship, nearly half the size of his own command vessel, but it looked crude and primitive. There were no elegant curves, no flowing lines, nothing that suggested advanced engineering. The hull was covered in what appeared to be armor plating, thick slabs of metal bolted directly to the frame. The weapon ports were clearly visible, dozens of them arranged along the ship's flanks and spine. It looked like something built for war, pure and simple, with no consideration for beauty or efficiency. The warning message was simple. The human vessel identified itself and demanded that the Valari fleet halt its advance. It claimed that the solar system was sovereign human territory and that any unauthorized incursion would be considered an act of war. The message was delivered in broken Valari tradespeak, clearly translated by a computer, but the meaning was unmistakable. The humans were telling the collective to leave. Zorath almost laughed. The arrogance of these primitives was astounding. A single ship, alone against 12 Valari warships, and they were making demands. He opened a communication channel and explained the situation calmly and clearly. The Valari collective claimed this region of space. The humans had two choices. They could surrender peacefully and accept collective rule, or they could be destroyed. There was no third option. Zorath gave them one standard rotation to make their decision. The response came almost immediately. A human female appeared on his display screen, her face hard and her eyes cold. She identified herself as Captain Laura Mitchell, commanding officer of the USS Horizon. She was not young, perhaps middle-aged by human standards, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that suggested years of experience. She listened to Zorath's ultimatum without expression, and when he finished speaking, she was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not, the smile of a predator watching its prey walk into a trap. She spoke slowly and clearly, making sure that Zorath understood every word. She told him no. Zorath stared at the screen in disbelief. No species had ever refused a collective ultimatum. It simply was not done. He tried to explain again, tried to make her understand the hopelessness of her situation, but Captain Mitchell simply shook her head. She said that humanity did not bow to threats. She said that her people had fought too hard and sacrificed too much to surrender their freedom to anyone. She said that if the Valari wanted Earth, they would have to come and take it. Then she cut the communication channel. Zorath sat in silence for a long time, trying to understand what had just happened. His officers looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders. The humans had refused to surrender. That meant only one thing. They would have to be taught a lesson, shown the true power of the collective, made to understand their place in the galactic order. He gave the order to advance. The scout fleet moved forward, weapons charging, shields at full power. They would disable the human vessel, capture its crew, and proceed to Earth. This foolish captain and her single ship would be the first casualties of the war, a footnote in history, quickly forgotten. That was what Zorath believed. He was wrong. The Valari scout fleet moved toward the human warship in perfect formation. 12 silver vessels, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun, their weapons charged and ready. Commander Zorath watched from the bridge of the endless dawn, confident in the outcome of this encounter. The humans had made their choice, and now they would face the consequences. It was almost sad. Really. Such a young species, so full of potential. And they had thrown it all away with their stubborn pride. He ordered a warning shot. There was no need to destroy the human vessel outright. The collective wanted prisoners, wanted to study these strange creatures, wanted to understand how they had developed space travel so quickly. A precision plasma burst would disable their engines without causing too much damage. The ship would be crippled, its crew would be captured, and the rest of humanity would learn from their example. The lead Valari cruiser fired. A bolt of superheated plasma streaked across the void, a brilliant blue streak against the blackness of space. It struck the USS Horizon directly amidships, exactly where the sensors indicated the main engine housing should be. The impact was spectacular, a flash of light that briefly outshone the distant stars. But something was wrong. The human ship did not break apart. It did not lose power. It did not even seem to shake from the impact. Zorath leaned forward in his command chair, staring at his sensor displays in confusion. The readings made no sense. The plasma bolt had struck the target. He had seen it with his own eyes, but the human vessel was completely undamaged. Its shields had absorbed the entire attack without any significant loss of power. That should have been impossible. The humans were primitives. They had only developed faster than light travel a few decades ago. Their technology should have been thousands of years behind the collective. Their shields should have failed instantly under Volari weapons fire. But the numbers on Zorath's display screens told a different story. The human shields were holding, and they were holding easily. On the bridge of the USS Horizon, Captain Laura Mitchell stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. Her executive officer, Commander Jake Reyes, reported the shield status in a steady voice. Minimal degradation, well within acceptable parameters. The alien weapon had been powerful, he admitted, but nothing their defenses could not handle. Laura nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Volari were arrogant, accustomed to facing species that could not fight back. They had grown complacent over the centuries, relying on their reputation and their superior numbers rather than actual combat effectiveness. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that was willing and able to hurt them. Humanity had not forgotten. Humanity had never had the luxury of forgetting. For thousands of years, humans had fought each other across the face of their world. They had developed weapons of terrible power, weapons capable of destroying cities, weapons capable of ending civilizations. They had stared into the abyss of their own extinction and somehow found the strength to pull back from the edge. And when they finally reached the stars, they had brought those lessons with them. The Horizon was not just a warship. It was the culmination of human military technology, the product of centuries of bloody conflict and hard-won knowledge. Its armor was made from advanced composites that could withstand impacts that would shatter ordinary steel. Its shields used principles of physics that the Volari had never even theorized. Its weapons were simple in concept but devastating in execution. Designed not to impress or intimidate but to destroy. Laura gave the order to return fire. The Horizon's main battery consisted of 12 magnetic accelerator cannons arranged along the ship's spine. Each cannon was capable of launching a 2-ton tungsten projectile at 3% the speed of light. At that velocity, the kinetic energy of a single round was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The Volari had never encountered kinetic weapons on this scale. Their shields were designed to absorb and disperse energy, to neutralize plasma bolts and laser beams. They had no defense against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. The first volley struck the lead Volari cruiser before anyone on the alien ship even realized what was happening. The tungsten slugs punched through the energy shields as if they were not there, tore through the silver hull like paper, and exited the other side carrying fragments of the ship with them. The cruiser did not explode in any traditional sense. It simply came apart, its structure disintegrating under the catastrophic transfer of kinetic energy. Zorath watched in horror as one of his ships ceased to exist. The destruction was so sudden, so complete, that his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. One moment the cruiser had been there, intact and functional. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of debris and vapor. There had been 300 Volari on that ship. They were all dead now, killed in an instant by weapons that should not have existed. The other Volari commanders were screaming on the communication channels, demanding orders, begging for direction. Zorath tried to respond, tried to organize a counterattack, but the humans were not giving him time to think. The Horizon continued firing, its railguns sending streams of depleted uranium into the fleeing Volari ships. Point defense lasers swatted down escape pods that strayed too close, denying even the possibility of survivors. It was a massacre. The Volari ships tried to run, tried to jump to hyperspace, tried to do anything to escape the relentless human assault. But the horizon was faster than it looked, its engines pushing it through space with unexpected acceleration. It chased down the fleeing vessels one by one, destroying them with methodical precision. There was no mercy in this attack. No hesitation. The humans were fighting to kill. In 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the battle was over. 11 Valari warships had been destroyed. Only the Endless Dawn remained intact, its engines damaged, its weapons offline, its crew cowering in terror. Commander Zorath sat in his command chair, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The human ship approached slowly, its weapons still trained on the crippled Valari vessel. Captain Mitchell appeared on the communication screen again, her face as calm as it had been before the battle. She told Zorath that she was sparing his ship for a reason. She needed someone to carry a message back to the Valari Collective, someone to tell them what had happened here today. The message was simple. Humanity was not prey. Humanity would not be conquered. Humanity would not surrender. If the Collective wanted war, they would have it. But the Valari should understand what they were getting into. They should understand that humans had been fighting since the day they first walked upright, that war was in their blood, that violence was their oldest tradition. Laura Mitchell smiled that cold smile again, and told Zorath to run home and tell his masters what he had seen. Then she let him go. The Endless Dawn limped back to Valari space with its terrible news. Commander Zorath stood before the High Council in the great chamber on their homeworld, his body trembling as he described what he had witnessed. The holographic recordings played on the massive screens above him, showing the destruction of the scout fleet in brutal detail. The councilors watched in silence, their faces gray with shock, as 11 Valari warships were torn apart by human weapons. For 3 centuries, the High Council had not convened an emergency session. There had been no need. The Collective was supreme, unchallenged, unquestioned. Minor rebellions were crushed before they could spread. Rival powers were absorbed or eliminated. The galaxy had been at peace, the peace of absolute dominion, and the Valari had grown comfortable in their supremacy. Now that comfort was shattered, broken by a single primitive warship and its cold-eyed captain. The council debated for hours. Some argued that the recordings must be fake, that no primitive species could possess such technology, that this was some kind of elaborate deception. Others demanded immediate retaliation, a massive fleet to crush the humans and burn their worlds to ash. A few suggested caution, pointing out that they knew almost nothing about human military capabilities beyond this single engagement. Perhaps diplomacy was the better path. In the end, pride won over wisdom. The Valari had ruled for 12,000 years. They could not allow this insult to stand. If word spread that a young species had defeated a Valari scout fleet, other races might begin to question collective authority. The subject peoples might start thinking about rebellion. The entire structure of their empire could begin to crack. No, the humans had to be crushed. And they had to be crushed quickly and publicly. Admiral Cyrus received his orders directly from the High Council. He was the most decorated military commander in Valari history, a veteran of 100 campaigns, the architect of a dozen conquests. His battle group consisted of 40 warships, including 2 massive dreadnoughts that served as mobile command platforms. Each dreadnought was larger than any human vessel, bristling with weapons, protected by shields that could withstand sustained bombardment. Cyrus had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start now. The fleet assembled at the staging point and made the jump to human space. 3 days of hyperspace travel. 3 days for Cyrus to study the recordings from the scout fleet engagement. 3 days to develop his strategy. He was not a fool. He had seen what human weapons could do, and he respected their capability, but he also believed in numbers. 1 human ship had defeated 12 Valari vessels. 40 Valari ships, including 2 dreadnoughts, would overwhelm any defense the humans could mount. When the battle group emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system, they found the USS Horizon waiting for them. But the human vessel was no longer alone. 12 more warships had joined it, arranged in a defensive formation around a much larger ship that Cyrus did not recognize. His sensors identified it as a carrier, a vessel designed to launch and recover smaller attack craft. The humans called it the USS Resolute. Admiral Kate Navarro stood on the flag bridge of the Resolute, watching the Valari fleet appear on her tactical display. She was 51 years old, a career naval officer like Laura Mitchell, with the same cold determination in her eyes. She had been given command of the 1st Carrier Strike Group 6 months ago, and she had spent every day since preparing for this moment. The aliens were coming, and humanity was ready. The strike group consisted of the Resolute and 12 escort vessels, including the Horizon under Captain Mitchell's command. Together they carried over 300 fighters, small single-pilot attack craft armed with missiles and guns. The fighters were the key to human strategy. The Valari had never developed comparable craft. Their doctrine relied entirely on capital ships, massive vessels that slugged it out at close range. They had no experience fighting against swarms of fast-moving attackers. Admiral Cyrus opened a communication channel and demanded that the humans surrender. His voice was calm and measured, the voice of someone who believed absolutely in his own superiority. He explained that resistance was futile, that the collective had weapons that could crack planets, that humanity had no hope of survival against the full might of Valari military power. He gave them 1 hour to stand down and submit to collective authority. Kate Navarro listened to the entire speech without interrupting. She had expected something like this. The aliens were arrogant, convinced of their own invincibility despite the evidence of the Scout Fleet disaster. They probably thought that engagement was a fluke, a lucky shot, something that could not be repeated. They were about to learn otherwise. When Cyrus finished speaking, Kate asked if he was done. He confirmed that he was. She nodded slowly, as if considering his words, and then she gave her response. She ordered all fighters to launch. The Resolute's hangar bays opened, and 300 human fighters poured into space like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. They formed up in squadrons, each squadron assigned to a specific target, each pilot knowing exactly what they needed to do. The Valari sensors tracked them but could not lock on. The fighters were too small, too fast, too numerous. The alien targeting systems were designed to track capital ships, not tiny craft that could change direction in an instant. Admiral Cyrus watched the swarm of human fighters approach and felt the first stirring of doubt. This was not how space battles were supposed to work. Capital ships fought capital ships. That was the natural order, the way things had been done for thousands of years. These tiny craft were an insult to proper military tradition. But tradition did not stop missiles. Tradition did not stop bullets. Tradition did not stop 300 determined pilots from tearing into his fleet with savage efficiency. The battle had begun. The human fighters hit the Valari fleet like a hammer striking glass. They came in waves, squadron after squadron, exploiting gaps in the alien formation that the enemy commanders did not even know existed. The Valari point defense systems tried to track them, tried to shoot them down, but the targeting algorithms were useless. They had been designed to engage missiles and torpedoes, not manned craft that could think and react and adapt in real time. Lieutenant Dan Cooper led the first attack run. He was 28 years old, a farm boy from Nebraska who had dreamed of flying since he was old enough to look up at the sky. Now he was diving through a storm of plasma fire, his fighter twisting and rolling to avoid enemy shots, his eyes fixed on the massive dreadnought that served as Admiral Cyrus's flagship. The ship was enormous, a mountain of silver metal bristling with weapons, but Dan was not afraid. He had trained for this. He was ready. His wingman, Lieutenant Nicole Park, flew just off his right wing. She was the best shot in the squadron, calm under pressure, with reflexes that bordered on superhuman. As they approached the dreadnought, she locked onto the main sensor array and fired. Her missile streaked across the void and struck the target dead center. The array exploded in a shower of sparks and debris, and suddenly the massive ship was partially blind. The dreadnought's commanders scrambled to compensate. They switched to backup sensors, tried to coordinate with other ships in the fleet, but the damage was done. Their ability to direct fleet defense had been crippled in a single strike. Other fighters were already moving in, targeting weapon batteries and shield emitters, slowly picking the giant apart. Meanwhile, the human capital ships advanced. The Horizon led the charge, Captain Mitchell pushing her vessel directly into the heart of the Valari formation. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, each officer knowing exactly what to do, each system functioning at peak performance. They had drilled for this moment countless times, running simulations, war games, exercises. Now the real thing was here, and they were not going to fail. The Horizon's main guns opened fire on a Valari cruiser that strayed too close. The tungsten slugs punched through the alien shields and tore the ship apart from the inside. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull as power systems overloaded and fuel reserves ignited. The cruiser broke in half, both pieces tumbling away into the darkness, and the Horizon was already moving on to its next target. Admiral Cyrus watched his fleet dying around him and could not understand what was happening. His ships were supposed to be invincible. His tactics were supposed to be flawless. He had studied warfare for centuries, had written books on military strategy, had trained generations of Valari officers. How could primitives be defeating him? The answer was simple, but he was too proud to see it. The Valari had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their military existed to intimidate, to crush rebellions before they started, to maintain order through the threat of overwhelming force. They had forgotten what it meant to face an enemy that could fight back, an enemy that was not afraid, an enemy that had something worth dying for. Humans had never forgotten. Every generation of humanity had known war. They had fought with spears and arrows, with guns and bombs, with weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. They had seen the worst of what their species could do. And they had survived. They had learned. And now they were applying those lessons to a new kind of battlefield. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Valari fought with desperate courage, their commanders refusing to retreat even as their ships were destroyed around them. They managed to shoot down a few human fighters, managed to damage a couple of escort vessels, but it was not enough. The humans were too fast, too coordinated, too ruthless. They exploited every weakness, punished every mistake, showed no mercy to those who had come to enslave their world. Admiral Cyrus died when his flagship finally broke apart under concentrated fire from the Resolute. The dreadnought had taken dozens of hits, its shields failing section by section, its hull cracking under the relentless bombardment. In the end, a full salvo from the carrier's main batteries struck the reactor core, and the ship vanished in a brilliant flash of light. 3,000 Valari died in that moment, including the most celebrated admiral in their history. The second dreadnought tried to flee. Its commander ordered an emergency jump to hyperspace, desperate to escape the slaughter. But the human fighters were faster. A squadron led by Lieutenant Cooper targeted the hyperdrive systems, their missiles tearing through the engineering section and destroying the delicate machinery that made faster-than-light travel possible. The dreadnought was trapped, unable to run, and the human capital ships closed in for the kill. When the shooting finally stopped, the silence was deafening. 32 Valari warships drifted dead in space, their hulls torn open, their crews gone. The remaining 8 vessels fled in disarray, their commanders too shocked and terrified to maintain any kind of formation. They jumped to hyperspace the moment their drives were charged, not even bothering to recover escape pods or search for survivors. Admiral Kate Navarro surveyed the battlefield from the flag bridge of the Resolute. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers, glittering in the light of distant stars. Bodies floated among the wreckage, Valari and human alike, united in death. She felt no joy in this victory, no satisfaction. War was not something to celebrate, but it was something humanity knew how to do. Human losses were light. 4 fighters had been destroyed, their pilots killed in action. No capital ships had been lost, though several had sustained damage that would require weeks of repair. It was a remarkable achievement. A victory that would echo through galactic history. Captain Mitchell brought the Horizon alongside the Resolute and opened a communication channel to Admiral Navarro. The two women looked at each other through the view screens, sharing a moment of quiet understanding. They had done what they set out to do. They had protected their home. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. But they both knew this was only the beginning. The news of the Battle of Proxima spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to interstellar communication heard the story within days. The mighty Valari Collective, rulers of 100,000 worlds, masters of the Orion Arm for 12,000 years, had been defeated by primitives. Not just defeated, but humiliated. 40 warships sent to crush a young species, and only 8 had returned. 2 dreadnoughts, the pride of the Valari Navy, had been destroyed. Their greatest admiral was dead. Their reputation for invincibility was shattered forever. The subject races of the collective watched the recordings in secret, passing them from ship to ship, from world to world, spreading the truth that the Valari had tried to suppress. Some wept with joy. Others began to whisper about possibilities that had seemed impossible just days before. If the humans could stand against the collective, perhaps others could too. Perhaps the age of Valari dominion was finally coming to an end. On the Valari homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session for the second time in a month. The mood was very different now. There were no more calls for war, no more demands for human blood. The councilors sat in stunned silence, their faces pale, their confidence broken. They had sent their best, and their best had failed. What could they possibly do now? Some argued for a massive mobilization, for gathering every ship in the collective and launching an overwhelming assault on human space. But the military advisors quickly put an end to that idea. The Valari fleet was large, yes, but it was spread thin across a vast empire. Pulling ships from patrol routes would leave dozens of systems undefended. And the subject races were already restless. A full mobilization might trigger the very rebellions they were trying to prevent. Others suggested developing new weapons, new technologies to counter human capabilities. But that would take years, perhaps decades. And there was no guarantee of success. The humans had achieved in 1 century what the Valari had not managed in 12,000 years. They had found ways to kill that no one else had ever imagined. Who knew what else they were capable of? In the end, the High Council chose the only path that remained open to them. They sent a diplomatic delegation to human space, carrying offers of peace. It was the first time in Valari history that they had sued for terms with a species they had intended to conquer. The humiliation was almost unbearable, but the alternative was worse. Captain Laura Mitchell received the delegation aboard the USS Horizon. She had been promoted to admiral in the weeks following the battle, given command of a new fleet being assembled to defend Earth. But she had asked to handle this meeting personally. She had started this war, and she wanted to be there when it ended. The Valari ambassador was an elderly female named Tara, one of the few counselors who had argued for caution from the beginning. She looked at Admiral Mitchell with something like respect in her ancient eyes. She had seen the recordings of the battle, had watched this human woman stand unflinching against impossible odds. Whatever else the humans might be, they were not cowards. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. The humans demanded much, and the Valari had no choice but to agree. The collective would recognize human sovereignty over their entire solar system and the 3 nearest star systems. They would withdraw all military vessels from a buffer zone extending 50 light-years from Earth. They would release all enslaved species within their territory, allowing them to return to their homeworlds or seek refuge in human space. It was a harsh peace, but Tara accepted it. She understood that the alternative was continued war, and she knew that the collective could not afford that. The Empire was already beginning to crack. Rebellions were breaking out on a dozen worlds, inspired by the human example. The Valari needed peace, needed time to stabilize their crumbling dominion. Admiral Mitchell signed the treaty on behalf of humanity. She felt no triumph in this moment, no sense of victory. She had seen too much death, lost too many friends, carried too many burdens to celebrate, but she felt something like hope. For the first time in human history, her species had a place among the stars that no one could take away from them. In the months that followed, everything changed. The liberated species sent delegations to Earth, seeking alliances, offering friendship, asking for protection. They told stories of centuries under Valari rule, of families torn apart, of cultures destroyed, of hope slowly dying, until the humans had shown them that resistance was possible. They looked at humanity with something like awe. These strange creatures who had done what no one else had managed to do. Other species began to ask questions about humans, to study their history, to try to understand how such a young civilization had become so powerful. The answers were disturbing. Humans had spent their entire existence fighting each other. Their history was a long parade of wars, conquests, genocides, and atrocities. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own world, and had come within moments of using them. They were violent, aggressive, and dangerous by nature. But there was another side to the story. Humans were also capable of incredible kindness, of sacrifice, of love that transcended all boundaries. They had built great civilizations, created beautiful art, explored the deepest mysteries of the universe. They had looked into the abyss of their own destruction and found the strength to step back. They were complicated creatures, full of contradictions, capable of both terrible evil and profound good. Admiral Mitchell understood this better than most. She knew what her species was capable of: the darkness and the light. She knew that humanity had not reached the stars because they were peaceful or enlightened. They had reached the stars because they were survivors, because they refused to die, because they fought for what they believed in, no matter the cost. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the dreadnought USS Vanguard, watching the first transports of liberated peoples departing for their homeworlds. Commander Jake Reyes stood at her side, now a captain himself, commanding one of the escort vessels. Lieutenant Dan Cooper had been promoted and given his own squadron. Lieutenant Nicole Park was teaching a new generation of pilots how to fight. They had won this war. But Mitchell knew that others would come. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. Other empires would rise to challenge humanity. Other threats would emerge from the darkness between stars. But humanity would be ready. They had always been ready. Mitchell smiled as she watched the transport ships disappear into the distance. Humanity did not start fights, but they always finished them.